Hi, I'm Wayde Compton. I'm going to talk about a neighborhood in Vancouver called Hogan's Alley. I've been doing work around the Black community of Vancouver for about close to 15 years now. And it all sort of arose out of poetic practice, funnily enough. I found that to write creatively in a place like Vancouver, out of traditions of African descent, I've had to do a lot of context creation for myself and sort of had this parallel project of just recovering what the history was and what the original context was of the city for Black folks in a city where it's been largely erased. Hogan's Alley was, so if you ever gone to Vancouver and wondered where all the Black folks are, they're integrated as of about the mid to late 60s because of an urban renewal project that wiped out a small community called Hogan's Alley, which was in the East End in what's now called Strathcona. And the funny thing about Vancouver is that it has the story of itself as being a city that sidestepped urban renewal because we never put a freeway into the city. But that's only half the story, this sort of self-congratulatory story. Because there was an urban renewal project, and though it wasn't finished, the first stage of it wiped out this community. And, the most famous surname in that community was Hendricks, because Jimi Hendrix's grandmother, that's her, Nora Hendricks, lived there and was a really key person in the community. I often say, Jimmy is the famous one, but Nora Hendricks was the real hero of the community, a matriarch who was very, very committed to the space. And she did eventually die in Seattle, but apparently on her deathbed she was saying, I gotta get better so I can go home, which was to Vancouver. There's a funny thing in Vancouver that if you look at the newspaper articles about Hogan's Alley, or just about Blacks in BC in general, it goes through about this 5 to 10 year cycle of people kind of rediscovering that there are Black people in the province or in the city. So it's like every 5 years, hey, there are Black people in this province. And there are Black people in the city. Here they are, right? Negroes live next door. And those two twins there, the Crump twins, who were worked on the waterfront with my dad for years and years. One of the key institutions of the communities were these chicken houses, what they call chicken houses. Most of the men were porters on the railway, which is probably why Hogan's Alley was where it was, which is right near the railway station. But a lot of the women in the community were the really successful ones, and they had these chicken houses. The most enduring of which was Vi's, which was right on Hogan's Alley itself, and lasted past the point of the community being destroyed in what was the remnants of it. And often they doubled as speakeasies, so they were chicken houses during the day and sort of illegal bars at night. People always wonder about why it was called Hogan's Alley, where that term comes from, and there are all of these different Hogans who are posited over the years. But I think that's mostly mythical, and it comes from this comic strip that came out of New York and was referring to, so Outcult created this fictional Irish neighborhood called Hogan's Alley. It was this kind of chaotic neighborhood, and that was sort of in the end of the 19th century, it was kind of a term meaning the hood, basically, right? Sort of a crazy kind of community that was chaotic, and so I think that's why Hogan's Alley got that name. There are other Hogan's Alleys in North America. That's the space as it used to be. If you know Vancouver a little bit, so from Gore right there on over to here, which is Main Street, that's where the Georgia Viaduct is right now. So that was sort of the heart of Hogan's Alley, this part right here. The Porter's quarters were right here. If you look at on this vertical set of lots there, above number 4. Vi's would have been right across from 47 there. Hogan's Alley was said to go all the way to Jackson Avenue. Right on Jackson Avenue there, Pryor Street, was where the African Methodist Episcopal Church was, which was the one and only black church in Vancouver. So the original plan was to put the freeway right down Pryor Street and to cut through that part, that T-shaped part of Hogan's Alley right there, and then dogleg through Chinatown and cut Chinatown in half all the way to the waterfront. It was stopped by community activists, mostly from the Chinese community. But the first stage of it was completed, and that was the viaduct there, and that was right where the black community was. I love this photograph. So this is 1936, and it's a church picnic that was in Stanley Park, the African Methodist Episcopal Fountain Chapel. And I love to show it to people who say things like there are no black people in Vancouver, or there was no black community in Vancouver, because it's just there are very few external photographs of folks out in the city that you can sort of see as outside, right? We have some archival photographs in people's homes and that sort of thing, but they don't really show the city in a way, so I love that image, it's amazing. It came out during the research at a certain point. Chick Gibson, so we were talking about, we wish there were more photographs of the community, and at one point he came to some event and rolled out this picture and said, do you think this is important? I said, oh my God, are you joking? After years and years of work, I started this thing called the Hogan's Alley Memorial Project with some other people, with the original intention of just to get some kind of plaque. At that time in 2002, there was really nothing left down there that would have signified that there had ever been a black community. If you walked around down there and you didn't know anything about the history, there would be nothing to show that we'd ever been there. And so we started this organization to get a plaque put down there, which I thought would be about a 2 or 3 year project. But we finally did get one, and that was exactly a year ago. And so it was kind of hard to place it because most of that part of Hogan's Alley is gone, but we put it as close as we could. So that's right at the site of where Vi's was, and that's Vi's granddaughter right there, Tracy McDougall. And that was done through the city, through the Vancouver Heritage Foundation. And recently, I don't know if you've seen these, the Canada Post stamps that were commissioned, one for Africville and one for Hogan's Alley. This is at City Hall. This is the council chambers. That's Mayor Gregory Robinson there, and Constance Barnes, Emery Barnes' daughter. Emery Barnes was the first, along with Rosemary Brown, was one of the first black MLAs in BC. So Canada posted these great stamps, and that's a guy named Fielding Spots and Nora Hendricks on the Hogan's Alley stamp there. It's a very significant moment. I think Fielding Spots would have been very bewildered to know that he ever made it onto a stamp. And I know being interviewed about this stamp, people have been sort of saying, Hogan's Alley had these significant people like Nora Hendricks and Fielding Spots. And I don't want to deny the brother or anything like that, but he didn't really do that much. What he did was he got his photo taken on a certain day, so he's there as one of the very few people who was photographed from the community, sitting in front of his home in Hogan's Alley. But I'm glad he's there. It's a close-up of an alley behind it. This is it today. So there's the viaduct. It's pretty ugly looking. Condos in the background, and that's what's sort of left of the alley. That's looking east, standing on Gore, looking east, so that's sort of the remainder of it. You can barely see, but there are these houses that they built here. It's a terrible irony, right? If you look at this is a new house there, and they're ridiculously expensive, $800,000 or something like that. And what's painful about it is, if you look at them, they're kind of these faux Victorian houses. They're sort of imitating the houses that had been there to begin with, but this kind of burlesque of them in modern times. But the fact that it had these old dwellings there was the justification for tearing it down, right? That it was blighted and there were these kind of old buildings. And they created these tower block projects, right? Like the McLean Park project. It was the exact same urban renewal scheme as they did everywhere in North America, really, right? So put a freeway through the black community or Chinatown, in Vancouver's case, both, shift the population into these tower block projects that are supposed to be better, that were really just this modernist experiment, and the experiment went terribly wrong, and then they destroyed these old communities. Well, in Vancouver, they've sort of rebuilt houses that look like the old houses that they hated a generation ago. That's thank you.